Hi, my name is Kevin Jones, and welcome to this talk on moving from Duende Identity Server to Open Identity Server. So Open Identity Server is a fork of Identity Server 4 that's been brought up to date. It's fully compatible with Duende Identity Server, but it will always be on a free-to-use license. Now, it's a straightforward process to move from Duende Identity Server to Open Identity Server, and we'll cover that process in this talk. If you want to look at the source for Open Identity Server, it's on GitHub, and it's at this URL, /rocksolidarknowledge/open.IdentityServer. Okay, let's look at the code. So this is the project we are going to convert. And this has an identity server built on top of the Duende libraries, and then two applications, a weather API and the weather MVC application. And they are sort of standard applications that we use to test identity server. So if I first of all run identity server, we see we are running Duende Identity Server 7.4.2, and we can click on the discovery document. And then from inside Rider, I can run both the weather API and the weather MVC application. If we look at the weather MVC application, this has an endpoint, which is /home/weather. I need to authenticate. The username is Alice. The password is pass123$. And if we log in, we get back to the weather homepage. So the MVC logs in the user and then uses the API to get the data. And that API requires a token so we can prove who we are. And we are going to port the identity server instance across to using Open.IdentityServer. So let's see how we do that. So the first thing we have to do is bring in the appropriate libraries. So if I open up the Identity Server CS proj file and edit it, in here currently we're using things like Duende Identity Model and Duende.IdentityServer. For this project, I can get rid of Duende.Identity Model, and instead of Duende.IdentityServer, I can use Open.IdentityServer. And we need to change the version as well. Now the version I'm currently using for this demo is a release candidate, but by the time you get to see this, the official version will be on NuGet. So the version I'm using is 1.0.0-RC2.5. So with that in place, if I build the solution, we are going to get numerous errors. And all the errors we are getting are because of namespaces. So for example, if I just pick the first one here and look in config.cs, it's trying to use duende.identityserver.models, and we don't have that library anymore. So I need to go through this code and update all of these using statements. So for example, here, we'd use open.identityserver.models, and then get rid of the reference to duende.identityserver.models. Now, I'm going to go through all of this code and fix all of those issues, but I'm not going to bore you along the way. So let me do that, and then we'll come back and see what else we need to do. So I've updated all of the namespace names, but we still have a few issues. Now, the first one are things like migrations. Now, I'm assuming that you already have a database and we don't need the migrations. So for now, we'll just delete that. And similarly with the seed data. So that's just used to initialize the database. So again, I'm going to delete that. That also means that in program.cs, we can get rid of this branch where we seed the database and just call run directly. We don't have licensing, so I'm going to get rid of this licensing information and then change the Duende here to say open and get rid of the incorrect using statements. And similarly in the CS.html page, as we don't have licensing, then we can get rid of that reference to the license. I'm also, while I'm here, going to change the welcome screen. So we'll change this to say welcome to Open.IdentityServer. And we'll also put in the Open Identity Server logo. Now, obviously, this isn't necessary for the code to run, but we're no longer using the Duende libraries. Now, there are a few other things we need to change. If I go back to the top of the project here, we don't support the creation of a user within this application. So I'm going to get rid of the create endpoint from inside the quick start. Then inside the login, we currently don't support dynamic authentication schemes. So I'm going to get rid of the identity store provider initialization. And then the place within this code where we set up the dynamic schemes. So I'll get rid of those lines there as well. So while the standard Open.IdentityServer doesn't support dynamic providers, Rock-Solid Knowledge does have a commercial component for this. So if you need support for dynamic providers in your IDP, then again, come and talk to us. And then finally, currently, there are two more things we don't support. And that's CBA, so let me delete that, and server-side sessions. So let me delete that. Now, I'm saying currently, support for these things are coming. Now, if you need that support urgently, then get in touch with us, and we'll see if we can build that support in for you. Now, we're almost there. If I go back to program.cs, there's one more thing I need to change. If you're using signing keys from inside Duende Identity Server, and you want the current signing key to be used, or you need to change the signing key, then we need to add a call here. And that call is to add compatibility key stores. Now, if you do this, then key rotation will be disabled. However, on the roadmap that we have for Open.IdentityServer, then key rotation is coming. We are building a key rotation component. It's just not quite there yet. So if I now run this version of Identity Server, we see the new welcome page. So welcome to Open.IdentityServer. We can see the version, in this case, the release candidate. And if I click on the discovery document, then we get to the discovery document. If I go back to the code and look at the weather MVC and look at its CS proj file, we'll see that this is using Duende.identity model version 8. And this gives us access to certain classes and constants, but this is open source. So within these applications, we'll leave this as it is. So again, from inside Rider, if I run the weather API and I run the weather MVC application, the application runs successfully and it's already connected to Identity Server to get a token. If I go into here and do /home/weather, we're asked to log in. Again, the username is Alice. The password is pass123$. Click on login. And sure enough, we log in. So it's working in exactly the same way. So hopefully you can see that the move from Duende Identity Server to Open.IdentityServer is quite straightforward. It's a matter of using the correct libraries and then mostly just changing namespaces. Now, as you saw, there are some features that are missing. So things like CBA and things like server-side sessions. However, they are coming. We do have a roadmap. If you need anything urgently, then please get in touch with us and we'll see what we can do. Now, the code I just showed you was quite straightforward. It was a very simple setup of Duende Identity Server, and that was easy to move across to Open.IdentityServer. If you have something that's a lot more complicated and you might need some help, again, please feel free to get in touch and we'll see what we can do to help you. I hope you found this video useful. The code for this video is on GitHub and it's at this URL. /KevinRJones/Duende-2-OpenIDS. And thank you for watching.